Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time we're going to get into something pretty crucial. We're taking a look at forests and how they're being impacted by us, humans, and what we can do.
It's fascinating stuff. There's a whole lot going on that most people don't realize.
Yeah, definitely. Like, we all know trees are important and all that,
Yeah.
but there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. So to kind of guide us through all of that, we're using this handbook on trees and forest ecosystems. And specifically, we're looking at Chapter 9.
Chapter 9, yeah, human impacts and conservation strategies.
Exactly. And it's broken down into four parts. First, it covers the effects of deforestation and land use change.
So, like what actually happens when we clear forests.
Right. Then it goes into how forests are adapting to climate change, which I'm really interested to hear about because I always wonder how they keep up with everything that's happening.
It is amazing how they can adapt.
Yeah. So then the third part focuses on why we need to conserve what they're calling mother trees and other key species.
That's a concept that's been gaining a lot of attention lately.
Yeah, I've been hearing about that too, so I'm really curious to learn more about what those are all about. And then finally, it wraps up with a discussion of different policies and sustainable forestry practices that are being used around the world.
So basically what we can actually do to make a difference.
Exactly. So, are you ready to jump in?
Yeah, let's dive in and see what we can uncover.
Okay, so first up, deforestation. I feel like this is something we all kind of know is bad, but I'm curious to hear what the chapter has to say about the real consequences of it.
Well, it's definitely more than just losing trees. Did you know deforestation is responsible for almost 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions?
Wow. No, I didn't realize it was that high.
That's more than the entire transportation sector.
Seriously. So basically, cutting down trees is worse for the climate than all the cars and planes and everything else combined.
Yeah, it's a huge factor, and it sets off this chain reaction. Well, when you clear a forest, you lose a lot of biodiversity. The soil degrades because it's exposed to the elements, and then the water cycle is disrupted.
Right, because trees help to regulate all of that.
Exactly. It's like pulling a thread that unravels a whole ecosystem. And it's not just something happening far away, in the Amazon or something. Those monoculture plantations, like the ones used for palm oil, those have a direct impact on things we use every single day.
Oh, like how?
Well, think about the vegetable oil you use, or even your shampoo. There's a good chance palm oil is in there somewhere. And a lot of times, to create those plantations, they're clearing vast areas of forests.
Oh, wow. I didn't really think about it like that.
Yeah, and this has a bunch of negative consequences. You get a loss of biodiversity, which makes these plantations really vulnerable to pests and diseases.
I see. So then they have to use more chemicals to control those.
Exactly. It ends up being this lose-lose situation for the environment. And oftentimes it hurts the local communities who depend on those forests for their livelihoods.
It's just such a mess. So basically, deforestation is driving climate change, destroying ecosystems and impacting all these products that we use without even realizing it.
Yeah, it's a pretty grim picture. But the chapter goes even deeper and talks about how climate change is directly affecting the forests that are left.
Okay, so it's not just us impacting them, but it's also climate change that's already happening now.
Exactly. It's not just some future threat. We're seeing these rising temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, and more extreme weather events. And all of that puts enormous stress on trees.
I remember a while back hearing about those bark beetle outbreaks in North America. Was that connected to climate change at all?
Oh, absolutely. So warmer winters, they aren't killing off those beetles like they used to. And that's led to these massive outbreaks that have devastated forests all across the continent. The trees are weakened by the warmer temperature.
Oh, right. I see. So it's kind of like a domino effect then.
Exactly. So the trees are weaker, pests and diseases spread more easily, and then these outbreaks increase the risk of wildfires even more.
So it's like a vicious cycle.
Yeah. Maybe instead of vicious, we should say tragic cycle, but you get the idea.
Yeah, that's a much better way to put it. So we've got deforestation making climate change worse, and then climate change in turn is hammering the forests that we have left. It's all pretty bleak.
It is concerning, but the chapter actually offers some hope.
Okay, good.
It turns out trees are surprisingly resilient. They have these incredible adaptation mechanisms that help them cope.
Okay, good. I was hoping there'd be some good news in here.
Yeah.
Tell me more about these adaptations. What are they doing to survive?
Well, for starters, they can actually adjust their leave-out times in response to warmer springs.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So they're like, oh, it's warm early, we better get started.
Yeah, exactly. And then they can also change their root growth to access deeper water during droughts.
Oh, that's smart.
And get this, they can even alter their wood density to withstand stronger winds.
It's like they're learning to roll with the punches. But even with these adaptations, it sounds like they're still going to need our help to make it through all this.
They absolutely do. These adaptations show just how resilient forests can be, but there are limits. If we want to keep these forests healthy and thriving, we need to step up and do our part.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what can we do? What does the chapter suggest?
Well, one of the most fascinating approaches is something called protecting mother trees.
Mother trees, huh? That's interesting. What are those exactly?
Well, these are older, larger trees that play this vital role in the health and recovery of whole forests.
I'm picturing like a wise old tree nurturing all its offspring.
You're not far off. These mother trees have these extensive root systems and fungal networks that connect them to all the younger trees.
Oh, wow. So they're like an underground support system.
Exactly. It's almost like a giant network.
Yeah.
And they can actually transfer nutrients and water to seedlings through these networks, giving them a better chance of survival.
So it's not just competition down there. They're actually cooperating and helping each other out. That's amazing.
Yeah, and they even send chemical signals through these networks, warning other trees about things like pests or droughts.
It's like they have their own communication system. So it's more like a whole community down there rather than just individual trees fighting for survival. That totally changes how I think about forests. But how do we actually go about protecting these mother trees?
That's where the chapter gets into the real nitty-gritty of conservation strategies, and that's what we're going to be diving into after a quick break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. Before the break, we were just starting to talk about these incredible mother trees.
Yeah, they're blowing my mind. All that's going on beneath the surface, it's a whole hidden world down there. So I'm really eager to hear more about how we can protect them.
Well, the chapter really emphasizes that protecting mother trees, it's not just about saving those individual trees. It's about protecting the whole forest's future.
Okay, so it's about the bigger picture. What makes them so crucial for the long-term health of a forest?
Well, for one thing, they're like carbon storage champions. You know, these older, larger trees, they've been accumulating carbon for decades, even centuries.
Right, I see.
So losing them, well, that would release a huge amount of carbon back into the atmosphere.
So by protecting them, we're not just saving the trees themselves, but we're also helping fight climate change on a larger scale.
Exactly. And remember those fungal networks we talked about? Those support an incredibly diverse ecosystem. Everything from, the microscopic fungi to large mammals, they depend on those networks.
Oh, wow.
So protecting the mother trees means protecting biodiversity as a whole.
It's like ensuring the survival of a whole community, not just one family.
That's a great way to put it. And then there's another fascinating point the chapter brings up. It's their role in post-disturbance recovery.
Post-disturbance, you mean like after a fire or a storm?
Exactly. So after something like a fire or a major storm, those mother trees, they can actually help jumpstart the forest's regeneration.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. So they're kind of like the anchors of the forest, helping it weather the storms, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
But we can't just leave it all up to them, right? What are some more concrete strategies that the chapter talks about for protecting them?
It does. And it goes beyond just simply fencing off individual trees. It talks about habitat restoration, which is like replanting native species and creating corridors for wildlife to move between those fragmented forests.
Yes, that makes sense. Give them the space and the resources to thrive.
Exactly. There's also a focus on reducing that human-wildlife conflict, like finding ways to, for example, keep deer populations in check.
So the young trees have a chance to grow.
Yeah, exactly.
I see. It's all about balance, isn't it? Balancing the needs of people and wildlife.
Absolutely. And the chapter also mentions a strategy called translocation.
Translocation, what's that? Like
Yeah.
moving entire forests around?
Not quite. It involves carefully moving individual trees or plants to new locations. It's often done to help them adapt to climate change or to reintroduce them to areas where they've disappeared.
That's really interesting.
It's tricky, though. You can't just pick up a tree and drop it anywhere. Scientists have to consider all sorts of things like the soil conditions, genetic diversity, and how it might impact the existing ecosystem.
Yeah, it sounds like a delicate balancing act, but it could be a really powerful tool if it's used correctly.
It is, and it really highlights that idea that we need to take an active role in helping these forests adapt, especially with climate change happening so rapidly.
Okay, so we've talked about how important mother trees are and some ways to protect them, but what about the rest of the forest? How do we manage those sustainably?
Well, the chapter shifts gears a bit here and dives into the world of policies and sustainable forestry practices. It's all about finding ways to use those forest resources without destroying them.
Right, because people depend on those forests too for their livelihoods. We can't just shut off access completely.
Exactly. It's all about finding those solutions that work for both people and the planet. And it highlights a whole range of initiatives, from local community-led forestry programs to large-scale international agreements.
So there's no one-size-fits-all solution. It has to happen on multiple levels.
Yeah, there's a real emphasis on the importance of collaboration and finding those solutions that work on multiple levels. Like, for example, there's something called REDD plus SAIL.
REDD plus L, about
Right.
that.
It stands for Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation.
Oh,
And it's a global initiative that provides financial incentives for developing countries to conserve their forests.
I see. So instead of just telling them, don't cut down your trees, it's about providing the support and resources to actually make conservation a viable option.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing the value of those forests, not just for timber, but for all the ecosystem services they provide.
Like clean water and carbon storage and biodiversity.
Right. So we're moving away from seeing forests solely as a resource to be exploited and more toward understanding their true worth.
That's a really important shift in thinking, I think.
It is. And the chapter also highlights the role of consumers in all of this. You and I, we have a part to play too. We can choose to buy products that come from sustainably managed forests.
Like voting with our wallets, right?
Exactly. And that sends a message to the market that we value these responsible practices.
Okay, so what else can we do on a personal level, besides just making those choices at the store?
Well, we can support organizations working to protect forests. We can advocate for stronger environmental policies. We can even volunteer for those local tree planting or restoration projects.
So we've got everything from international agreements to those individual choices, all playing a role in protecting our forests. It's a lot to take in. What do you think is the most important takeaway from all of this?
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's exciting to realize there are so many different ways to make a difference.
I think the most important takeaway for me is this shift in perspective that the chapter really encourages. It's about seeing forests as these complex, interconnected communities and, seeing ourselves as part of that web of life.
Yeah, it's fundamental, really. For so long, we've viewed forests as, primarily as a resource to be exploited. But when we start to appreciate how intricate it all is, all that interdependence between all those different species, I think that changes how we think about conservation, too.
Right, right. Like thinking about those mother trees and those underground networks, it's amazing. Like we said, it's a whole hidden world that we're just beginning to understand.
And it makes you wonder what else is out there that we don't know about yet, right? But even with what we do know, I think it's clear that protecting these forests is absolutely essential for the health of the planet and for our own well-being too.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not just about saving trees, it's about safeguarding our future. And the chapter really drives that home.
It does. And the chapter ends with this thought-provoking question that I think is worth sharing. Imagine a world where we view forests not just as resources, but as these complex, interconnected communities that we're a part of.
I love that. That's such a powerful image.
Mhm.
I mean, how do you think that shift in perspective would actually change our actions?
I think it would change how we consume, how we manage the land, how we interact with the natural world. Maybe it would inspire us to plant a tree or to choose sustainably sourced products or to speak up for policies that protect our forests.
Yeah, yeah. Or maybe we'd even start to see those mother trees as kind of like
Oh,
wise elders,
yeah.
offering lessons in resilience and interdependence.
That's a beautiful thought. And it's one that could really lead to a more sustainable and harmonious future for all of us.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for diving into this fascinating topic with me. I feel like I've learned so much. And I'm definitely going to be looking at those trees in my neighborhood with a whole new appreciation.
You and me both. But that's what these deep dives are all about, right? Sparking curiosity and understanding and inspiring us to connect more deeply with the natural world. So, until next time, keep exploring. And remember, we're all part of this incredible web of life.